yelling and getting into arguments, feeling irritable, just not wanting to be around people.
In my head.
Hello everybody, if you're new here, I'm Ryan Liberty, and we are here to humanize mental health. So if you're on board with that mission, hit subscribe and hit the bell after you hit subscribe to get notified each time that I do a video. I do videos on mental health here Monday through Friday. Tonight we're going to talk about PTSD attacks. What are the symptoms of those? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it look like to other people? All that's important. We're going to get right to it. Alright, so when we're experiencing PTSD, what we're experiencing is this memory, this traumatic memory in our mind. It's triggering us, and we're experiencing all these symptoms. So we're experiencing a racing heart, we're experiencing getting hot, we're experiencing all kinds of different symptoms of anxiety, and that's because our amygdala is activated and it's preparing us for fight or flight. The problem with PTSD is that we may not necessarily know that we're experiencing a memory. Sometimes it's called an emotional flashback that we're experiencing, whereas a flashback, we might feel like we're actually living it, we actually see the visions of what has happened to us, and we're in that experience and we viscerally feel it and we need to get away from it or we need to fight back against it. But when it's an emotional flashback, there could be something from that experience that we don't even recognize is coming from that experience that's triggering us. So I like to give the example of maybe there was music playing when something was going on, but another example that I would use is, let's say somebody was abused by their parents, and whenever they were abused by their parents would say, "Come here." So "come here" has become a trigger in their mind, and now let's say it was the father. So if it was the father, now later in life, they may not remember the child abuse. It may not be something that's like at the top of their mind, but when somebody who's a male says to them, "Come here," in the same tone as their father did, they may not recognize that they're reacting to it the same way that they would react to their father, but they're reacting with PTSD and feeling this surge of anxiety and the surge of, I gotta fight back or I have to flee, because they're reacting to their father. It's an emotional flashback, and we don't necessarily have the memory in front of us to know that's what's going on. The feelings just happen. Now everybody's going to experience PTSD just a little bit differently, depending on whether you're somebody who goes for that fight reaction or the flight reaction or third reaction, which I'll talk about. But the fight reaction, typically we see that as outward symptoms, and we are externalizing and we get angry and we feel like we need to fight back. So you may see your heart's racing, you start getting hot, you may start to even like blush as the blood kind of courses through your body, and like your face turns red with anger, and you feel like you need to do something, your violence basically, you need to push that energy outward, and you may in an attempt to not be violent, you may just start blaming people for things and screaming at them and yelling and getting into arguments, feeling irritable, just not wanting to be around people, feeling edgy. That would be more of like a fight response. A flight response would be something like a sinking stomach and feeling maybe even cold, feeling like you need to get out of there, feeling like there's this place right now where you're standing is not safe and you need to leave. You just need to get out of there. Now, before I go any further, I should make a distinction between what I'm calling a PTSD attack and what a panic attack is. So a panic attack is a symptom of panic disorder, but you can also find it in different anxiety disorders. And a panic attack is basically just anxiety that gets too high of a level, and now you're fearing what's going to happen. You're just fearing the anxiety, basically, and typically in panic disorder, you're fearing another panic attack, and that kind of brings on the panic attack, which is this self-perpetuating cycle, which is awful. But when we're talking about PTSD, it's pretty much the same thing. The only difference is that it's linked to a specific event, some traumatic event in your life, or multiple traumatic events in your life that is causing this. And so again, it may not be so obvious in the moment what's going on. With a panic attack, it may not be so obvious either because you're just experiencing fear. But with PTSD, there is something that's triggering it, and you can pinpoint, maybe you can't pinpoint the specific memory, but you can pinpoint the situations that it's happening in and what keeps bringing it up. Now, with that said, there's more that I need to continue on here with the symptoms, but if you want to get more into the details of the symptoms of PTSD, I have a playlist here, and it goes over everything that you need to know. Believe me, I stuck everything in there. Check it out, bookmark it, save it, whatever you got to do. Share it with a friend if there's somebody else who has PTSD. It's the best information that I could possibly come up with that you need to know about PTSD, so I'll put that up there, somewhere up here, for you to check out. All right, so going back to what we were talking about, the symptoms, there's this third thing that could happen with fight or flight, and that is freeze. And basically what happens, the theory anyway, is that when you are in a traumatic situation and you can't fight or you can't escape, then you freeze, and it's kind of like playing dead is the way we would think of it. And what happens in that instance is we do things like dissociating. Dissociating is when you don't feel your body anymore, or like your surroundings become a little unreal. You could almost think of it kind of like that feeling when you're starting to faint or you're starting to fall asleep, or the typical example is when you're driving somewhere and you don't really kind of realize how you got there. There's like this chunk of time that's kind of missing and you're like, that was weird. It's kind of like that. And so some people, they won't get angry, they won't have outbursts, they won't get irritated with people, and they won't avoid situations in fleeing. They won't be trying to get out of there and showing anxiety of like, let's go, we need to leave. They'll just kind of like shut down, and they won't have a lot of emotions. They won't engage with people. They might seem a little distant from you. And for them themselves, they're going to feel like they're cut off from the world. They're going to feel like everything's a little like woozy, almost like you're drunk a little bit, and it's like you're tired, you're exhausted all the time. I know because I've experienced this myself, and I do have a video about that as well. If you'd like to learn about dissociation, I'll stick that up there as well. So those are kind of like the three things that are happening in the middle of a PTSD attack, but there's also flashbacks in regards to things like nightmares, and especially after you've just experienced a traumatic event, you may have these recurring nightmares, and your brain is trying to kind of put together what happened and make sense out of it, and trying to remember so that it can protect you in the future. And so that's kind of what these nightmares are about. And if you haven't coped with the trauma efficiently, hopefully with a therapist or somebody qualified to walk you through that, then these nightmares can become recurring and they can be really distressful, and you may think about them when you wake up, and if you ruminate on them, you may be re-experiencing the trauma. Not good stuff. So the best thing I would recommend is to get into therapy if that's something you're experiencing yourself. Now, as I mentioned, if you're somebody who needs to know more about PTSD, I have a whole series on PTSD. I'll put the link up here again for you to check out. I have many, many more videos here on my channel about PTSD, so subscribe if that's what you're interested in, and hit the bell to be notified every time that I do a video. If you are somebody who needs some extra help, I have some free resources over on my Patreon page. Check those out. And if you want to support me in my goal of humanizing mental health, you can support me over there. Finally, I'm sure our community would love to hear from you. What is it like when you experience PTSD? What's it like when you're going through an attack? Leave that down below for us and let us know what helps you in those situations. As always, thank you for joining me here. I'll see you next time.